today is our 250th episode. And
Woohoo!
yes, and I am super proud. I'm excited about it. We have been doing this podcast now for almost 2 years. And for everyone that's been with us since day one, we are so incredibly grateful for your support of the show because you have been amazing.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Okay, today's going to be a little bit different. And I want to start off by saying that a couple weeks ago, there's this thing called the Gallup World Poll. And every year they release their World Happiness Report. So they just released the report for 2024. And just to give you a little context, this report has been ongoing every year since 2012. And they use 6 variables to measure life satisfaction and determine happiness throughout the world. And this is based on things like GDP per capita, social support, life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and corruption. And for the first time ever, the United States has fallen out of the global ranking of the top 20 happiest countries. And last year, the United States ranked 15th. This year it fell to 23rd. So that is an 8-point fall within 1 year, which I think is a pretty significant drop. What do you think, Stephanie?
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm surprised it hasn't dropped even more, just considering how bleak things are right now in the country. And it's interesting because I tried looking up just some common statistics on how many Americans are on antidepressants, for example. And the CDC only had figures through 2018. And I'm interesting how I can't really find anything about happiness past 2020, probably because it looks alarming. And I did find one article, and it said that they're estimated that 37 million Americans are on antidepressants, but I couldn't find any verified stats. And I think that that is on purpose. I think that they're not posting this stuff because they know that COVID totally fucked with everybody.
Oh, 100%. And this report kind of goes into why there's been such a huge shift. And what's interesting is Americans over the age of 60 ranked the United States fairly high. I think they had it in the top 10 countries to live in. But when you look at where the decline's coming from, it's from the viewpoint of Americans under 30. And overall, they ranked the United States 62nd out of 143 countries. And so the results of the report show that the majority of Americans under 30 feel worse about their lives. They feel less supported by family and friends. They feel less free to make life choices. They're more stressed. They're less satisfied with their living conditions and the economy, and they're less confident in government. And the report also showed that many Americans have expressed low levels of trust in the United States political system. There's an increased perceptions of corruption and fears of political violence.
Yeah. Well, and just with politics alone, I feel like we can see a major shift in where people were in 2020 versus now. It's now that we've had Biden and we've had a taste of what it's like when these progressives take over, I think people are really starting to realize that we need to get back to normal, and that these progressive policies like the open borders, defunding police and constant war do nothing to help people, but more importantly, individuals are suffering under these policies. It's actually affecting people's everyday lives when they go to the grocery store, when they go to fill up the gas tank, when they're worried that, there's going to be war, when they're watching, what's happening with Israel and Gaza. And so it's affecting people both on the right and the left. And I feel like everyone is just super dissatisfied with the political state of our country right now.
Yeah, and I don't think the results of this report are shocking. I mean, since the start of the COVID pandemic, it's just been a downhill shit show in our country. And the politics of the Biden administration, like you were just saying, have completely destroyed the country. And we literally have the worst mental health crisis that we've ever had in America. And I believe that this is all related to the purposeful design of pushing the DEI agenda, creating gender confusion, manufactured racism. We talked a couple weeks ago about Trump derangement syndrome. We have the worst border crisis in history. You've got illegal migrants taking resources away from American citizens, and now these new threats of terrorism from within our own borders. We have massive increases in crime throughout the country. We have the constant threat of World War III on multiple fronts, not just like one country. It's coming from all over the place. We have a horrible economy, insane inflation, and the most in your face, blatant corruption that we have ever seen in our federal government. I mean, we know our government's corrupt and has probably been corrupt for a very long time, but it has never been this in your face as it is with this administration. And we have been steadily losing our freedoms with censorship and this massive disinformation, misinformation campaigns. We've seen the effects of this on all social media platforms. And I think a large majority of people in the United States have no faith in our future. And that includes me. So I don't think it's just people under 30, Stephanie.
No, no. I mean, same with me. Like, I agree with everything you were just saying. But here's what I will say is like, at least I was able to buy a home and like move across the country and all these other things before shit hit the fan. Did you just burn yourself or start choking? Are you okay?
I just swallowed my coffee wrong. Sorry.
Oh my God, I love it. I thought I like said something and I was like, did I just say something like funny? I don't think I did. That's hilarious.
I was just
We
trying
got
to
to
mute
make like a
myself.
bloopers episode. This shit's so funny for
Sorry.
everyone listening. Like, you got to watch the YouTube videos or go on like Rumble because sometimes like there's some funny stuff behind the scenes. Um, but yeah, like at least I was able to buy a home and like move to Florida before everything got so crazy with inflation. And my husband and I talk about this all the time because we're like, things have gotten so expensive so fast that had we tried to move to Florida now, I don't think we would have been able to. Like
Yeah.
home values have like tripled. There's people that we know that are single, so they're on a single income that are literally moving states because they can't afford the lowest rent that's available. And it's like things like home ownership and even just investing for retirement, they seem impossible for people under 30 just starting out. So like I do get where, they're talking about people under 30 are really affected because you're coming out into the world and it's like you can't afford groceries and it is a lot harder to get an apartment and pay rent. And then like looking at the social impact of everything, obviously COVID has screwed us all up, but I wanted to ask you something. So, like, I saw this video. There was this girl on TikTok, and there was this video that she made that was going viral. And she was talking about how she doesn't even remember what life was like prior to 2020. And
Mhm.
she's like, I am a completely different person than I was in 2019. Like, I don't even recognize or remember the version of me in 2019. And she was saying things like, I just don't even want to go anywhere anymore on the weekends. Like, I'd rather just sit on the couch and curl up in a blanket and watch Netflix. And like how before, like COVID, she's like, I loved going out to restaurants. I loved trying new things. I loved going on vacation. I loved going out with friends. And I totally relate to this. And it didn't really hit me until she said it because, like I'm in the phase with little kids. So I've just always thought, like, well, yeah, it's hard going out when you have little kids. So that's why. But when I was reading the comments, like there were so many people that were saying the same thing. So I was like looking at it and I'm like, we used to go out like as a family multiple times a week. We would go out to dinner, we would go shopping, we would go and just like get out of the house and explore our city. And I literally have no desire to do that anymore. And I don't think it's like depression, but it's like just this feeling of like blah. And it didn't hit me till I saw this video that really like that I think came about during COVID because during COVID, we became so conditioned as a society to isolation. Like isolation became normal. And we got really used to just talking to people through social media or on Zoom. We got used to people just dropping food at our door. And like, notice how when you order food, well, I don't know about the Czech Republic, but here, when you order food, they still have the option for contactless delivery or whatever, which I always choose because I'm like, I don't want to deal with anybody. And I feel like I was not like that before COVID. And now it's like so hard for me to like want to be around people. It's the weirdest thing. So I don't know if that's just me and I tend to be a little more introverted or like if you face that, Tara, but I just feel like there's a lot of people that I know and that you see on social media that are like, yeah, I would just rather stay in than go out and about. And it's like post COVID. It's like we've been conditioned to feel that way. Do you agree? Or are you like on a totally different page?
I feel like I'm on a different page right now, but when I was living in the United States, I agree with you 100%. And I really didn't go anywhere or do anything.
Yeah.
And when you started talking about it, I was like, okay, no, my life's not like that, but it actually was. And I had a couple good friends there that were always going out and doing stuff, and I would just go every now and then because I just couldn't be bothered most of the time.
Yeah, I know. And I mean that's like I have my little group of friends here and I mean coming up with a date just for us to go out to breakfast, it's like pulling teeth. It's like, okay, well, let's just plan in like 3 months, you know? And it's like not that
Yeah.
we have anything going on. It's just like I don't know, like the excitement is gone, I guess,
I
with a
think
lot of things.
living in Europe, I'm in a mentality of I want to see as much as I can while I'm here.
Yeah.
So I'm in more of a go out and do things mode. But
Well,
I also spend a lot of time by myself. So
I wanted to ask you about that. Like since we're talking about this happiness survey, how is it in the Czech Republic? Like, do you feel like people are happier? Do you feel like people are out and about more? Like, how is it different?
oh, absolutely. And the survey results prove that because I think the Czech Republic was listed as 18
Oh,
in the top,
wow.
yeah, in the top 20. And again, United States was 23rd. I think the top countries were Finland was number one and has been number one for like the past 7 years. But you had the Scandinavian countries who were like in the top five, like and then Switzerland. And I should have like had the list in front of me, but I don't. Um, but most of the countries that have been in that top percentile have stayed there. And the United States was the only one that had a significant drop.
Yeah.
And I feel, I guess it depends where you go because, like, when I look at the news of a lot of things happening in Europe, the protests here are out of control. Like, if you look at Germany, if you look at Spain, if you look at France, like massive protests taking place on like a very regular basis. The area where I'm in, it's totally different. People are out. There's tons of families here. It's spring right now, so it's absolutely gorgeous. You see all of these little pop-up little like beer gardens and little wine places, and everyone's out on bike paths, and it's just such a different way of life than what I was used to in the United States, and people here seem to be enjoying it. So I can see why the Czech Republic is in the top 20.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was with my family on Easter, they were asking about you. They're like, so how is she liking it over there? And I was like, actually, I think she's really enjoying it. Like she's
Yeah.
sightseeing and she gets out and, everyone just walks there and gets fresh air, even when it's snowing. And they were like really surprised. They're like, wow, I wouldn't think that that would be a great place to live. But
Mhm.
it's like, it's just our different perceptions. And, even with the protests, when I see that stuff on social media, it does kind of energize me. Like the farmers getting
Yeah.
together and like, they're uniting and like I feel like there's still this like culture of like oneness in those countries. And I feel like we've kind of lost that here in America. And like I feel like we are kind of a lazy country, you know?
Well, I do think, though, that because Europe has a history of communism throughout many of the countries here, and it's something that really America hasn't experienced. So when shit starts to go south here, people view it differently because they know what it's really like. Whereas in
Hmm.
America, like nobody fucking knows. Like we've
That's true.
never had this issue.
We've had it so good for so
Mhm.
many generations. We
Yeah,
don't even like the only instance I have of anyone I know would be my grandparents, like,
right.
and what they went through with World War II. And, we don't have any understanding of like what it could be like. But I feel like we're getting a taste of it with the Biden administration because they're leaning so far to like socialism with the way that they're doing things. And like you said earlier, it is like blatant in your face shit that they've been doing. And it just adds a lot of anger and rage to the equation, at least for me. And I
Mhm.
think for a lot of people that, are kind of like us, where we're not really like, I've never considered myself a conservative. I'm just a normal American that's like, what the hell happened? And really the thing surprisingly that makes me feel much better is talking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Tara, like if we did not have this podcast and have the ability to like joke about the things going on and voice our opinions, and the fact that like I can just text you and be like, holy shit, did you see this? It helps me. Like I would be in such a bad place mentally if I was just holding it all in. And I did. Like prior to the podcast, I was holding it in and it really led to like I would say depression and a lot of like built up rage and aggression and stuff. And I think that that is like really important to talk about because I'm constantly trying to encourage other people to voice their opinion because not only can it help like the general conversation in our country, but it can help you as well. It's almost like it's
Yeah.
a form of therapy, it's like liberating. And then you start finding people that have the same values and the same vision and the same goals. And I think that that is a really really important part of being happy that we don't recognize, that we don't talk about a lot, this like community aspect. And, all we hear about is diversity, DEI diversity. Well, sometimes you don't want people with diverse opinions. Sometimes you need that tight knit group that has the same values, the same, structures and the same background to really feel bonded. And I kind of feel like that's what this podcast has done for me and like made a huge difference in helping me kind of manage this aspect that could be really negative and could have certainly like destroyed my mental health.
Oh,
So
100%. And I was having a conversation with Erin the other day. It's my best friend. And she was
we need
asking
to
me
have
like,
Erin back on.
I know she would love to come back on too.
Yeah.
So Erin, we're having you on. But she was asking me like, what are your plans when you come back to the US next year? And she was like, are you going to stay in Texas or what do you see yourself doing? And I had no answer for her because when I think about my future, it's really weird. I don't have a clear vision of my life. Like I have plans and goals I'm working on. There are things I want to accomplish. But if I sit there and I try to like picture my life in a year or 5 years, it's just like this weird wall of gray. And it's such an odd feeling because in some ways right now I'm happier than I've ever been. And I'm in this period of just trying to embrace and enjoy my day-to-day life, especially this experience of living in another country. And there's so many things in my life that I'm grateful for and happy about every day. But when I think of my future, like I don't have a concrete vision. And I think that a lot of people before COVID, like, I thought I had my life on lockdown. I really did. I had a job I loved. I was living in a blue state, but I was in a community that I absolutely loved. I had a great group of friends. I was pretty happy. And I just never thought that my life was going to take the turn that it did. And I intended to stay in law enforcement until I retired. And I had a very specific plan for my life and specific goals and dreams. And then everything changed. And I mean, I was very fortunate because I didn't have a business that I was forced to shut down. I didn't lose my job. I didn't have any close family members die. But the pandemic and all the chaos of the summer of 2020 resulted in me making like very massive life-changing decisions about not just my career, but my life in general. And I made a lot of really positive changes in terms of my mental health and my quality of life. But since the Biden admin came into power, like I have struggled with consistent feelings of uncertainty and anxiety about our future and this overwhelming sense of dread and disbelief, like major disbelief. I'm constantly shocked about the direction that our country has gone in. And I feel like so much hinges on this next presidential election, which is why, Stephanie, like you and I are so a broken record. Like we constantly repeat that this is going to be the most important year ever to get out and vote before our country is completely destroyed.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to be interesting because I feel like if Trump does not win, there's like the last bit of hope that people are holding on to. So it'll be interesting. Like, I think we'll see a huge negative shift if that doesn't happen and a positive shift if it does. And I didn't save the clip. I didn't really think about talking about this on the podcast today, but I saw an interview that's going viral with RFK Jr. on CNN. And
Hmm.
he was arguing with the host because he's like, look, she was trying to make it all about how Trump is destroying democracy or the threat to democracy. And he's like, look, the real threat is Biden. And he's like, he is the first president to weaponize the federal government to go after his opponent. And not only that, but he said from like day one, Biden had been using the federal agencies to block RFK, to censor him on social media,
Yep.
refused to give him bodyguards, which is like the first time a president has ever refused, a running mate to have protection. And I mean, he made a really strong case. I think everyone should go find that video, but I think it just goes to show like the ruthlessness that we're dealing with. And again, it's so in your face, and especially going after Trump. I don't know about you, but I know we did talk about it before Mar-a-Lago was raided. I was like kind of over Trump. I'm like, I really like RFK, and like I just don't know if I want to deal with the shit that comes along with the riots and everything else with Trump. But then they kept attacking him and going after him. And it's like, in a weird way, I feel like it has united us. I feel like there's so many people, and even people that hated him before, people on the left that are coming together and seeing this monster that is the president and kind of rallying together. And it is in a way like uniting us. So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, kind of like COVID was, because I feel like during COVID, as awful as all of that was, I do think it woke people up to like just looking at their lives. And like you said, we had everything planned out. Everyone had everything planned out. You knew
Yeah.
when you were going to retire, how much money you were going to have. Like everything in your life was like just kind of set. And then COVID shook everything up. People realized, you know what? I'm not happy in this job. You know what? I don't want to go back to work. And so while that can bring about like some negative feelings, I do think it's a blessing because it causes you to like make positive shifts in your life, just like you did, like moving and like doing different things, taking different career paths. I think the end result is positive. It's just kind of a messy process, right?
Yeah, and I do want to see too to what you were saying with Trump. Like I have been a Trump supporter all along. Like I think his politics are fantastic. Like his mean tweets and angry orange man shit aside, like he did more for this country in my opinion than any president has in a long time. But I don't know, it was like maybe 2 months ago or something, we did an episode where I had played a clip from Andy Frisella, and he was talking about how Trump doesn't have to do any of this. Like the guy was a fucking multi-millionaire, excuse me, like friends all over the world, like just had the most amazing jet set, perfect life. And he chose to put all of that at risk to stand up for this country. And everything that has been done to this man, he didn't need any of it. Like he could have walked
Yeah.
away at any second and not been in this presidential race and not be fighting for this country. And I don't care what you think about him personally. He has put everything on the line to do what's best for America. And I don't know how anyone can't see that and respect, like, holy shit, this is someone who doesn't need to be doing this. Just like you and I don't need to be doing this. We're doing this podcast because we fucking care what happens in our country.
Well, yeah, and I feel like the people that are negative towards him are the people that are just negative in general. They just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like we talk about that with these extreme leftists. It's not even about like the policies or the principles. They're just hateful and they
Yeah.
need to like let that out, and they need to have a bad guy so that they can play the victim. And it's really sad because it's like that's what it is. I see a lot of really unhappy people that are just sort of pouring that energy into these crazy political, you know, policies that are really destroying the country and make it's like misery loves company. And that's what I feel like the goal is half the time. But I do think that Trump has made so many strides with his presentation of himself. Like
Mhm.
when I hear him talk now, it's different. It's more toned down, but there's like more compassion in his
Yeah.
voice. And I think it's like he really cares, and it's hurting him to see how bad the country's hurting. And I know there's people that think that that's bullshit, and that's fine. But I've always been really, really good at reading people and their energy. And there is not one bit of doubt in me that that man, like, he loves this country. He
Yeah.
loves American citizens. He wants to get it back to where it really needs to be for us to all thrive again. And when I look at my life when he was president, it was better. I didn't have like any of these worries. You could go to the grocery store and like really not think twice about it. You know what I mean? And like you could buy a home. Like there were so many things that we took for granted. And now we see just how bad it could get, how quickly, it can just all go to hell when you have some crazy lunatic as president like Biden and the people surrounding him. And like you were saying before about your vision of the future, it's crazy because my goals before Biden were all about like my income and growing my business and, even like material things, like the kind of car I wanted or like the next handbag I wanted to buy. None of that shit matters to me anymore. Like, it is so crazy how much my perspective on life has changed because now the only thing I want to do is like buy land. Like, I literally want to build like a compound for my family,
Yes.
like my parents, my grandparents, like grow my own food. I mean, never in a million years did I think I would be like a green, like gardener type person. I have so many vegetables growing and fruit in my yard. It's crazy. And like, I really just want to disconnect. And it's wild. Like, back to what I said earlier, the person I was in 2019,
Yeah.
I don't even recognize her. Like, I do not even recognize her. It's so different. And I'm just thinking about my kids. I've got a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And it's like, I have to speak up and I have to look at our future because it's really scary, the world that we're leaving them. And we've got to step up and do something. And I feel like Trump is our last hope. And if he doesn't get in, I think it's going to be really grim, you know?
Oh, yeah. And like I can't even imagine having kids in today's world. I mean, I don't have kids, right? And it just seems so scary because this is nothing like the world we grew up in. And we talked about this in the episode we did with your daughter Alexis last week. Like kids have completely different concerns and priorities than we did when we were kids or teenagers. And when I was her age, I never thought or worried about what was going on with politics. But this is a different world, and not just for kids, for everybody. Like we've been saying, most people are struggling, whether it's mentally, financially, socially, people are struggling. But I want to shift this to like a positive note, which I feel like this has actually been a fairly positive podcast. But
Yeah.
today is our 250th episode. And
Woohoo!
yes, and like I am super proud. I'm excited about it. We have been doing this podcast now for almost 2 years. And for everyone that's been with us since day one, like we are so incredibly grateful for your support of the show because you have been amazing. And for our newer listeners who haven't been with us from the beginning, we just want to like do a quick like rehash of why we started this podcast in the first place and why we believe it is so critical to be unapologetically outspoken, especially now more than ever. And, I came from an environment where I was not allowed to express my political beliefs because of my career. I had to remain impartial and keep my opinions to myself. And before the world turned upside down with COVID and the insanity that ensued afterwards, I was okay with that because I believe that politics should be kept out of the workplace unless that's your actual job as a politician or an investigative reporter or some related field. But when the defund the police movement started and I was living and working in a state that was like the worst for law enforcement and leading this movement, I had to make a very significant and personal decision about my life. Did I want to continue in a job where I didn't feel I was making a difference anymore and where I had no support from my government? Or did I want to stand up for my beliefs and speak out against what I saw was happening with free reign crime and false propaganda and taking away the rights and freedoms of law abiding citizens who were just trying to make a living? And I chose the latter. And in doing that, I lost my career, but I gained the most insane sense of personal freedom. And we didn't start this podcast right away. I think it was maybe like 8 months to a year after I left my job. And, the first thing I did was start expressing myself with writing blog articles, but it wasn't until Stephanie and I had a conversation. I mean, we've been friends for a while before we even broached the subject of politics. And we had a conversation one day where we realized we were both experiencing the same frustrations with what was happening in America and that we were both just normal, everyday women. We weren't conservative, we weren't liberal, we were just in the fucking middle, normal people. And we decided to create this podcast and go public with our opinions. And at that point, I felt like I had nothing to lose because I'd already given up my career. And once I started expressing my opinions on a public platform with writing articles that were like out there for the world to see on the internet, I knew I had no option of going back because I'd already said too much. So it was like a no-brainer for me to take it to the next level. But Stephanie, you were in a totally different situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think about that conversation all the time because wasn't it like such a relief to see, like, oh my gosh, there's someone out
Yes.
there that gets it and that thinks, like I do. And I was so nervous because I have a business and I had a big
Yes.
audience. And even when I was still in the corporate world, it's like, you're not allowed to just say whatever you want online because you represent the company. And like, here, with my business, I really kind of had this feeling that a lot of people that followed me were probably like on the left. And I was really surprised because there were so many people that were like, thank God. Like they had that same feeling of relief when they were like, she's normal. Like she's not this crazy, like liberal. Um, and I think there's so many people like that are still hidden because they made it so scary for people to come forward and you're afraid you're going to lose everything. But there's a lot of people out there that agree, and I think it's helped me. It's definitely helped me in my business because people just feel like they can relate to me in a whole deeper level. And a lot of people that I thought would like hate me for it, people that I assumed were like super progressive, they've been like the most supportive ones. And there's actually been a few people who were pretty left and have said, like, this has completely changed my outlook because I didn't know half the stuff. I was just going along with whatever they were telling me, my head in the sand, and didn't realize, like, the trans agenda, for example. They thought they were being supportive of something, not realizing how much it was hurting kids. So, like, knowing that it's making a difference is like amazing. And like I said, just being able to get it out there and like say what's on my heart has been the best therapy in the world. And I really recommend everyone just make that leap. It's scary at first, but you don't regret it because, again, you find your people, you find the people that share the same values as you. And I think that that is more important now than it ever has been before. And like, no one can stay silent, everyone has to speak up.
Yeah, and I just want to point out too that like I have never been comfortable on social media. I did not grow up with all the shit that we have nowadays. I mean, I feel like I'm 80, but I'm not quite that old yet. But I like I don't like selfies. I don't like making videos of myself. I don't understand how all this shit works. And I want everyone out there to know that like without the effort and the knowledge from Stephanie, we would not have a successful platform on TikTok. I would not be doing this podcast because she handles the technical end of everything. So I want everyone to know that Stephanie is the rock star behind all of this. But despite my aversions to social media, I fucking love doing this podcast. And it's because I think the message is so important. And I care more about speaking the truth and waking people up to what's happening in America and the world than I do about my personal feelings of being uncomfortable on camera. So if you're like me, and you have something to say, but you're shy or you're introverted or you don't like going public with your opinions, get the fuck over it. Like it is now or never. Like if we don't save our country, you're not even going to have the option to speak up because it's going to be too late. So get out there, like speak your mind, like speak your truth. Like this shit is so important.
Oh, well said. I think that's such a good note to leave on. You just wrapped that up perfectly. And yeah, like speak up. It's time to get over it. If you don't speak up now, like I said, come November, if Trump doesn't get in, like we're in some serious trouble. We're already in serious trouble,
Yeah.
but like we're not going to be able to dig ourselves out of this hole if it goes on much longer. So everyone speak up, like share these episodes. I think it's a great way if you don't know how to broach the subject to like open people's eyes. Just start sharing things, share TikTok videos, share podcast episodes, news articles, like get the conversation going, because a lot of the people that you might think would be very against it, they might feel differently now that their life is being impacted with inflation and just everything else going on. So hopefully that inspires you. And yeah, happy 250th
Yeah.
episode.
Woohoo.
And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.